Welcome to Warrior Money, the show devoted to supporting our brother, sister veterans. I'm Patrick Murphy.
And I'm Dan Coons.
Only 1 in 4 veterans feel financially ready to leave the military. And that transition, it can be confusing, stressful, and full of unknowns. That's why these Army veterans, Wyatt, Frasier, and Kyle Eberly, launched Sitrepres to Steer Co. to help service members navigate their next chapter with confidence. They've been through it, they get it, and they're here to help others do it even better. Please welcome to Warrior Money, Wyatt and Kyle. Gents, welcome to Warrior Money.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
All right, we always start off bottom line up front. So, Kyle, I'm going to go to you, my friend. What do you really want to say to people who give veterans transitioning out really bad advice? Things like, go to University of Phoenix, it's just as good as Tepper or Wharton for your MBA, or you don't need to do this, you don't need to do that.
I mean, what I would say is that there's a whole cadre of really successful veterans who've transitioned to the private sector by going through these top tier programs, right? You know, going through Wharton, through Carnegie Mellon, through HBS, through these great MBA programs. And so veterans have the tools, they have the skills, they have the resources, the peer mentorship, the financial help through the GI Bill to go to these top schools. So why would we do anything to dissuade them from pursuing these paths, right? And especially when there's all this great peer mentorship out there, we should do everything we can to have veterans go through these great schools and pipelines so they can go be the next generation of leaders in the private sector and inspire others to follow them.
That's right. And frankly, that's, it's all about, that peer mentorship and talking to folks. But you got to be careful, just like in the military, you have barracks lawyers. Sometimes they can be really wrong.
Yeah.
So go get a free JAG for advice. All right, so let's talk about your military journey, Kyle, first. You were with the 10th Mountain Division. I love that division because Bill Bowerman served in World War II, earned a Silver Star, came back, was a track coach at the University of Oregon, was Phil Knight's track coach. Walk us through, I know you're obviously a West Point graduate, but walk us through your military career after West Point.
Yeah, so when I graduated from West Point, I commissioned as an aviation officer in the Army, and I went down to flight school, was Fort Rucker, Alabama. Went through the training course there, graduated as a UH-60 Black Hawk pilot, and then my first assignment was at the 10th Mountain Division with the 10th Combat Aviation Brigade, Task Force Phoenix. Deployed to Afghanistan with them. I was platoon leader there while I was deployed in RC East, the eastern part of Afghanistan, doing combat operations for 2010 to 2011. After that, came back, went to the Captain's Career Course down back at Fort Rucker, and then went to Fort Hood, Texas, where I served helping train Guard and Reserve units who were getting ready to deploy to different parts of the world as part of the total Army component. From there, I did my active duty time, got out, went to Carnegie Mellon for my MBA, served as a reserve officer for 2 years, 301st RSG up in Butler, Pennsylvania. And when I finished my MBA, graduated and started my work in the private sector. So, got to fly a lot of missions in a helicopter, got to lead some great soldiers, and still trying to help continue that service here with Sitrepres.
Yeah. How did you pay for Carnegie Mellon, your MBA there at Tepper Business School?
Through the GI Bill, and also through a scholarship because it's a private university.
This is how small the world is. I was looking at Carnegie Mellon. He was the guy that I called at Carnegie Mellon.
That's right.
As he was part of that's literally how I met Kyle for the first time.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I'm in service. I'm trying to figure out MBA programs. And this guy on the other end, his name's Kyle. And I'm like, I put this together later. I'm like, Kyle, are you the same Kyle? And I was like, yeah, it was. So that's an example of me calling another service member during a period where I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And you gave me good advice. I eventually didn't go to Carnegie Mellon, but you gave me some good advice on what that transition could look like. So you actually did tell me that you were getting it funded from the GI Bill and that it was a great way to go to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the best program out there, especially with Yellow Ribbon to help you go through the private universities, whereas GI Bill's a little more slated for public, but you can still graduate debt free, which is just such an incredible opportunity to be able to do an MBA for pennies on the dollar compared to your classmates, your civilian classmates.
Yeah. Why you, for paratrooper, 11th Airborne, Alaska, what did you do after West Point?
So I graduated West Point and immediately commissioned as a medical service corps officer. So that is not a doctor. Don't confuse that. Many soldiers would come up and asking me about everything, from their knees to getting them a prescription. I basically led the operations for the medical unit inside of an infantry unit. So I was, like you said, up with, at the time it was the 425. They've since gone to the 11th Airborne Corps in Anchorage, Alaska. loved being an Arctic paratrooper. Was fun, really every single day being in Alaska. And from there, I actually did a year recruiting doctors for the Army in St. Louis, and decided to get out like Kyle. I went to the other side of Pennsylvania, to the University of Pennsylvania, the Wharton School, where you actually were one of my professors. You know,
That's how I met Wyatt. Yeah.
was able to hang out with both
yeah.
of you.
Yeah.
I actually used vocational rehab, or VRE is a program. So
For your warden?
for Wharton, right. So it's similar to the GI Bill. Basically, if you have a 20% disability rating or higher from in-service injuries, that's basically a program that's used for helping soldiers transition who do have those disabilities from in-service to then pay for the complete cost of the tuition. So I was able to go to just an incredible business school at Wharton. Really, really loved my time there, and was able to not only pay for the school, but you also get a stipend from the VA. Would encourage anyone that is transitioning to look at the GI Bill, also look at VRE. You know, these are entitlements that the American public has really been gracious in giving us, and you know, Congress people like yourself, right, were instrumental in making sure that those were more available to soldiers. So since left Wharton, now work at an operating role as chief of staff in a lower middle market private equity portfolio company.
Cool. All right. So we've all experienced the bad advice that we've kind of started the outside of this on. But I find it hilarious that Sitrepres and Steerco's kind of started as like a meme page on Instagram. And now it's like, if not one of the most trusted places where transitioning service members get their insights from, especially the junior military officers and kind of the junior grade folks. Like, I got to understand how it like, what was like, how did it start? It's just like a little meme page. And then did you ever expect to be here now talking about this from like the perspective you are now?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the origin story of it is fairly interesting, right? So when you said, hey, you talked to me when I was at Carnegie Mellon. I was I was the president of the Veterans Club, right? And so I would get a lot of inbound phone calls like that. So I'd be talking to folks, hey, considering getting out. And I was like, okay, this is cool. There definitely seems to be like an information gap. And then when I started working as a management consultant and I'm traveling, I would continue to have these conversations. And at the same time, I saw there was basically like this explosion of meme pages on Instagram that talked about professional life, right? So, like consulting pages, investment banking pages, et cetera. But what I didn't see was anybody that was talking about what is it like to be a veteran in the private sector, right? Because there's also military meme pages, right? But there's nothing in between the two. And so I'm like, well, I'm getting all these calls. Clearly there was like an information demand for it, right? So I'm like, well, what if I started this and I'd be able to kind of do it at scale? And I like to think I have a sense of humor. Some people may agree, disagree, but
legitimately funny.
Yeah, I was like, the key to doing this is to do it where it's funny. So you have an awareness engine, right? So people want to follow social media, right? It's not social public relations, or it's social media. People read it to be entertained, and at the same time, you can make it informative and mix in helpful tidbits or advice, right? And you'll be able to reach a really wide audience. And so that was essentially like my idea on how to do it. And it's just kind of grown from there. And I always actually kind of figured that I thought there would be, I thought it would get a lot bigger. And that's not like me, like a vote of self-confidence in myself. It's more of just like, I saw like the demand, the market demand.
You start posting things that immediately get engagement.
Yeah.
And you immediately start to create this little network effect.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like you immediately start to see the impact of the work that you were doing.
Yeah. And you just, people just, it got really big really quickly, and like I started getting like, people would come up to me in public, which is always a little crazy to be like, "Hey, you're the Sitrepres guy."
You're that guy.
Yeah. So,
you should too.
I was like, "Oh wow, this, social media is crazy, reach and scalability." Yeah. So, it's great to see, right? And just that you're able to have such a big impact using a platform that essentially costs you nothing except your time, right? So, really cool to see that.
Cool.
Yeah. And then how about you? How did you connect?
I think, honestly, we joke about this, that we're not totally sure when we first connected, but I followed the page when it was, 1,100 people, really, and would kind of text back and forth with Kyle, and we both realized we had some ideas. I very similar to Kyle, saw that there was this massive knowledge gap, that there was a lot of mentors, and it was very dispersed, right? And I think we both just had a lot of ideas about how to grow the page. And so, Kyle and I just, continued to form a friendship and continue now a business partnership with the page, and grow it into something that is now not just an information page, but also a recruiting agency for people looking to hire veterans, both defense tech companies, private equity companies, and also doing things like this to help continue to grow that platform and continue to grow the community.
Yeah, and we have a minute before break, right? So walk us through, how could people find Sitrepres to Sirico? I mean, you're on all the platforms, but
Yeah, I mean, we're on obviously on Instagram. So Siricos, you can just look it up. We have the siricos.com website. We actually just launched our new website here the other day. It has a ton of great information, articles, job postings, a community forum on it. You can find us on LinkedIn as well. We do similar but different content, and we also have a Substack which you can follow as well. So we're multi-channel, right? Many different ways to reach us.
yeah, and each of those audiences have different, people don't realize different algorithms. People want to see different things, and you got to tell them, you just can't put the same content on every single.
Yeah, you got to tailor it to the audience.
I joke that it's the same people looking at Instagram and LinkedIn, and people want to get on LinkedIn. They have to at least feel like they're being educated, right?
Yeah.
But people get on Instagram and they just want to be entertained.
Mindlessly. Yeah.
Mindlessly, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
So
Totally.
it's the same motivation on LinkedIn, but they have to at least pretend that they're
They're
being educated. Right?
Right.
Totally.
Which is why your memes are hysterical and why, it's so popular. All right, well, listen, we're going to be right back with more from Wyatt and Kyle. Just a minute. Welcome back to Warrior Money. We're joined by Wyatt and Kyle. Gentlemen, thanks again for being here at Warrior Money. We were just talking about Sitrepres Sirico before we left and how people can find you. What has shocked you on the base level of knowledge of folks that are getting out? Like every year there's about 200,000 veterans or active troops who become veterans, but not everyone's going to go into the NBA. But what about if they're trying to find a job? What's some of the things that you were surprised that they didn't know?
So what I tell veterans or folks who are transitioning out of the military is, in the military, you're essentially in a separate system
World
from society, right? You're in a separate resource allocation system, right? Like right now, like when you're just a normal citizen, you're not in the military, it's a market-based system, so capitalism, the way resources are allocated, supply and demand, that doesn't really exist in the military, right? It's kind of a top-down system. It's you're being told what to do, where to go, right? And I know they've introduced some market stuff in the Army, at least, but it requires an entirely different set of skills when you transition to the private sector. Being able to market yourself, understanding interviews, being able to understand that nobody's just going to give you a job, right? You've got to go out. You have to, one, find who might be looking to hire, articulate your skills, feel the skills might be a fit. Understand compensation, negotiation, and it's just something the average veteran is just not well equipped to do, right?
Yeah.
So it's just this kind of like base skill set that most veterans lack.
Can you give us a success story though of someone that you helped out? You don't have to use their full name, but
Not only that, my favorite thing.
Yeah.
My favorite thing you do is actually screenshot some of like in your social medias.
Yeah.
You screenshot the responses from people being like, "Hey, you helped me do this." I would love to hear how good that feels. Where does it come from, and what does that look like?
Yeah, like I said, we now run a business. We have this platform on one side of a military community and really, really talented veterans. And the other side, we have businesses that are looking to hire those veterans. So we do a full service recruiting company where we screen those veterans, we get people applying. And part of that screening is we get the resumes, we determine, is this person good enough for us to call, do a first round interview? If they are, we pass them to our corporate partners. And there was one time I had a Green Beret that sent me his resume. It was a mess, to be totally honest. It was multiple pages. It was a narrative format, right? If you would have sent this to anyone, they're not going to read it, right? Veterans have a really hard time with resumes because we've never made one. So I see this and I think, this guy has a lot of potential. I'm just going to call him up and explain, like, you need to do this resume better. You're not going to get hired, right? Just give him some tough love. And like any Green Beret, super receptive, right? Very much like, all right, show me, do you have an example? So I sent him my resume, and within like 24 hours, he'd sent me his resume, was amazing. Sent it forward to a hiring partner. He's now working at one of the companies that we recruit for. Really awesome, right? This guy is at one of the leading defense tech companies in the world, and honestly, without actually being able to spend the time and shoot that forward, and we have resume templates on our website that people can use. Without that time, right, he probably would have just wondered why hiring managers aren't giving that back to him. And honestly, that's something that your commander in the military, you talk about barracks lawyers, you're never going to get someone in the military that's going to teach you how to write a civilian resume or even what to put on there, what's valued.
Or not to over-exaggerate some nonsense.
Hey, Dan, I've never seen a sales resume that doesn't say that they've hit 140% of quota and did President's Club.
Yeah.
Every single one.
Or those inconspicuous years where there's nothing listed in there.
Yeah.
Those sorts of things. What about you? What's your example of a success story?
Man, there's so many. Just I know kind of index heavily on the MBA, but I'll use a more recent example, and that was it was a friend of mine. Met him through the page, and he was leaving the 160th. He's an enlisted veteran, and he really wanted to have a job in big tech, right? And so I was coaching him through. He went through the skill bridge process. He got they were like, hey, we don't have a role open for you right now, right? But we may have a role open for you here in a few months, right? And I was basically coaching him and like, how do you kind of keep that connection warm with the team that you're on during your skill bridge, right? How do you keep showing them, articulating your value, how you're interested in it, right? And coached him through it, and also coached him through like you should also look at some other jobs as well. Keep looking for the going through the job search process, just so you have backups. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. But through the coaching that I was able to give him, he was able to secure this job offer in big tech. He didn't have to leave because he lives in Tennessee. Didn't have to move his family to Tennessee. It was the exact job he wanted, and it took him a little longer. It took him about 6 months after the skill bridge, but he's able to get this job now. He's at this company and just making great money, and his family has a great future. They don't have to move, et cetera.
Yeah, I think it's one of the pieces I try to give veterans. Like, don't take the first job offered. Like, it took 6 months, but good things come to those who wait, right?
Yep.
And I think a lot of folks just go for the first thing. I mean, you're telling a story for those who aren't, part of our military culture, military community. The 160th, the Night Stalkers, that's an elite unit of aviators based right out of Fort Campbell, Kentucky, right near, the border of Tennessee. But just walking, that great American, through that makes a difference.
Well, it's not only that though. Like the cool part of that I just heard was an enlisted soldier, right? And so in the non-market based economy that could be the military, the hierarchy people based on officers and enlisted, and the part of the transition, the hard part of the transition is if you're enlisted, thinking that you're like making the transition from that sort of structure into a corporate that really doesn't care about that. And not only do they not care about it, but like the inferiority complex or the imposter syndrome that can strike people as they're trying to make that transition. So that to me, I think was the part of that story that resonates the most. And I think it's like really probably compelling when you're sitting in these rooms where like they're getting advice like, hey, just stay in your status.
Mm-hmm.
But you're like, hey, like don't stay in your status. There's a whole different world. It's a whole different economy.
Yeah. I mean, we kind of focus heavily on officers, but enlisted have so much to give to the private sector, and we don't want to like tell them like, hey, you gotta. There's nothing wrong with like some of the jobs, and we say, hey, you want to go like be a police officer, or you want to go like drive trucks or whatever. Yeah. But the experiences and the leadership that they had, because our NCO Corps is like the envy of the world, right? Like we should try and give those folks the opportunity to do more than what I guess maybe they think they're capable of.
Right, because on the outside, like, there's 1 million soldiers in our army. 88% of them are enlisted. The majority of those enlisted actually have a college degree.
That's
yeah.
Or they've gone through.
And if they don't, we
there.
also get a lot of questions about this from enlisted soldiers about, hey, I would love to get an MBA. It seems totally out of reach. I don't even have an undergrad. Or they say, look, I'm getting my bachelor's degree with my GI Bill or with VRE. Do I need to go work first? And we always say, like, you did work, right? You have work experience, right? You don't need to go back into the civilian sector, work for 4 years, and then go get an MBA or a law degree or a graduate degree.
Yeah.
Period. And especially why for like, obviously we met at Wharton, but 10% of your class were veterans. I mean, of the 850 students, first year MBA students full time, 10%, 85 of them were veterans.
And we had plenty of, Wharton also prides itself, I think, on being open to having those enlisted soldiers, having a variety of different experiences. The civilian sector really doesn't it doesn't know the difference between a squad leader and a platoon leader.
As
Yeah.
quickly as you can change your mind about that from your perspective and get into that, I think that's as fast as you can do that. It's important.
And Kyle had a nugget out there, and we're going to work Q&A in a second, but the nugget about skill bridge. What people don't realize that it takes 3 to 6 months to get an American civilian to make him an American soldier, through basic training,
Yeah,
AIT, et cetera. And then we basically give him a week of Soldier for Life, TAPS program. And, skill bridge says, hey, if you want to hire these American warriors, we'll keep them on payroll for DOD up to maybe 6 months, depending on their rank structure. To hire the rank, less time, but it's great for corporate America to hire these, basically try them out for free because they're still on Uncle Sam's dime. All right, we're Q&A.
All right, this is my favorite segment of the show. Well, I like all the segments of the show, but my segment of the show is where we talk about real rapid fire questions that we kind of come out with you with. Normally, I start with the first question: is what do you know about money now that you wish you knew when you were younger?
Money now I wish I knew when I was younger. It'll buy you convenience, and the more of it you save and invest, the more you'll have in the future.
The more convenience
right?
you
So,
have.
yeah, so you should delay consumption until the future, depending on what you need.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the same thing, that, money, at the end of the day, it does buy you convenience. It does buy you, less stress. But, I would also tell my younger self to prioritize the things that make you human, prioritize those things that, don't just, look at things. But yeah, it makes life more convenient. It's not bad to say, I want to earn a good living.
You should want to be able to earn a good living. There's nothing wrong with wanting to,
Yeah.
and coming from the military, right, where pay's transparent and everything, and like it pays capped, right? Folks maybe sometimes kind of, like, oh, I don't want to try and make more. Like you should. It is okay trying to make money and like earn wealth for yourself.
What's the biggest mistake that you see transitioning service members make from their time in service into the civilian job, their first civilian job?
I think when you get like the military does such a great job of like basically onboarding and training folks, right? They do it at scale. They do it every year. We can take somebody who doesn't know anything about helicopters to being a helicopter pilot, right? When you go into the private sector, I would say that when you get hired, they're looking like they hire you, you get to the interview process, and obviously you got to get like onboarded or whatever, but they're hiring you because they're hiring you for like a skill or an expertise, or so they're kind of looking at you like you should know what to do, right? And it's kind of way different. Like you can't like wait for instructions. You have to be able to like go out and start showing value and like building teams and building networks, right? And you're never going to have the same sort of authority that you did when you were a commissioned officer, right? It's more likely you're going to have to do influence, and so understanding like, maybe I'm not actually leading, like a team or whatever, but like I can influence and have a really wide impact, and folks will look to me,
That is a hard transition.
as being like a subject matter expert or an expert in my domain, rather than, me saying like, well, you got to train me to do that.
Yeah, it's almost, and just to kind of, because that's a great answer that I haven't heard yet. It's almost like as these organizations are getting more horizontal, right? You're going to have less people under your control.
Yep.
And that's very different than the military structure. So corporate doesn't necessarily reward people; they reward productivity.
Yeah.
And your ability to influence cross chains is really critical to that.
Yeah.
Private sector wants its folks to do more with less, right? You see you see in the news about these flattening of management change, right? They want to remove managers. They want like one manager to have a certain span of control, and they, and that's because hey, even if you're an individual contributor, right, and you're not a leader per se, you're still a leader. You lead in a different way.
Right.
So.
Right.
Yeah, it totally makes sense.
Yeah. Listen,
Shareholder.
Kyle, Wyatt, thank you so much for joining us on Warrior Money. That's going to wrap up our show. So listen, subscribe, and review Warrior Money on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you hear your podcast, or find us at Yahoo Finance. I'm Patrick Murphy.
And I'm Dan Coons. We'll see you again next week.
This content was not intended to be financial advice and should not be used as a substitute for professional financial services.